Welcome back to the From the Pavilion podcast. I'm Kartik and Ed.
I'm Ed Borath.
Ed, we are going to focus heavily. Well, let's drill down on the USA today. I know there's a lot going on in the T20 World Cup. If you want updates, you can check out our YouTube videos at the From the Pavilion YouTube page, and also on select days, most days actually, on Beyond the 90 as well. I noticed there have been a lot more views on the Beyond the 90 YouTube page, so we might keep it going on there. But we want to focus predominantly on the U.S. today, and not just on the pitch for the U.S. and the great back-to-back matches they've had in this World Cup at the Chepauk in Chennai. I think arguably the two best performances in the modern international history of the United States have both come in a World Cup. We're talking about all kind of T20 internationals. So back-to-back, really good vibes, still have an opportunity to go through depending on what happens in the Pakistan-Namibia game. But Ed, how did we get to this point? How did the U.S. Gel in these last two matches? And I know you have some thoughts about the close call against India, and then the Pakistan match as well, and how that factored into this.
Absolutely. Just to go back, recap a little bit, when we discussed Pakistan, we were talking about the bowlers that were out, whether that would necessarily be a big factor or not. I don't really think so. Van Skalwyk had a great game against them, picking up 4 wickets, and we seemed to play pretty well defensively. But now seeing what's happened since then, I got to rethink that. The United States goes 196 and wins by 93 runs against the Netherlands. And then when we take a look at their game against Namibia, they put up 199, which they defend pretty easily. Namibia only getting 168. U.S. wins by 31 runs. But more importantly, I have to look at the bowling to see what happened. Was I still on? I think I lost somewhere.
No, you're still going. So I'll just edit that out. Keep going.
Okay. Sorry.
You were doing good.
Okay.
So just keep going.
All right. No, that's fine. Yeah. So I think that we need to now re-examine that Pakistan game and take a look. We had 2 of our key bowlers taken out against India. I say taken out, maybe they were, but certainly injured. Ali Khan, who was out in the Pakistan match, comes back, bowls pretty well, and keeps the United States a lot closer, allowing them to score more runs. And then the same, with Shubham, who did not bowl even though he played in the Pakistan game. He wasn't bowling. So by taking out those 2 bowlers, that's 8 overs, and you have to start to wonder what happens. Because if they're bowling, I don't think Pakistan puts up 190. If Pakistan doesn't have 190, then you're going to take different tactics into the batting when you're up at bat.
Yeah, and I also have made kind of maybe it was a coping mechanism, Ed, quite frankly, saying, well, Shubham couldn't run out singles and Manak was frustrated, but maybe it worked out because he stayed on strike and he was able to produce all these runs. In fact, he's one of the leading run producers in this tournament, even though he didn't even get on strike today, or I think maybe he got on strike very late. Trying to remember, it was late if he did get on strike because we hadn't lost many wickets. That's how efficient the performance was against Namibia, which we're not talking about that match yet. But so there were runs left on the table in our innings against Pakistan. There were at least 4 overs. There were 4 overs Ali Khan would have bowled, and there were at least 2 or 3 Shubham would have bowled. We know how well Van Skalwyk did bowling in that match. We know how poorly Netravalkar did bowling in that match. We know there had to be a change to bring Kengeji in against the Netherlands, and Netravalkar was sat. You think about these things. You think about how effective the opening partnership was of Manak and Cheyenne in the last 2 matches. And maybe if Andres House, after he had been so unproductive in that New Zealand match, if he had just been dropped initially or dropped deeper in the order, kept as the wicketkeeper, but maybe dropped deeper in the order, what might have happened? Because that opening partnership, the opening partnerships were terrible for the U.S. in those first 2 matches. And then they were lightning in a bottle. In fact, Namibia didn't get a wicket today against that U.S. partnership until the power play was over. So able to keep their wicket, able to create a flow of runs in these two matches. It just felt like everything clicked. But I do think, Ed, getting back to your point, all of that may have flowed differently, even with the lineups we had in those two matches, if, in particular, Ali Khan had not gotten injured. I know I dwell on that in the India game, but it was absolutely a turning point, 100% a turning point in that match. And then not having him against Pakistan was extremely costly.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just kind of break it down a little bit here. India gets 161 for 9. Okay, and that's with the injuries. They had a couple big overs late, scoring 20 runs. I think they had 20-plus overs.
Yeah, the final over was 22 runs.
That's a pretty
good score. And that was after that was an over, Ed, that Ali Khan would have bowled if he hadn't gotten hurt. And India had 22 runs. So that they only got to 161 because of that.
Correct. Right. Now, Pakistan, 190. We're going to come back to that in a second. I know that's really what we're talking about. But let me just kind of move through for a second to the other games. USA versus Netherlands, 196, 103. And, of course, Namibia, 199, 168. So what we're talking about, if we look even like 170, that's a 20-run difference. And when we take a look at those runs, that's 3 sixes, 4, just a couple more boundaries. And suddenly the score is very different. So if you're talking about 8 overs, if we're talking about a potential 48 balls by not having some of our top bowlers in there, it's very easy to see where that runs get away from you. Pakistan ends up getting 190, and now you really have to chase. If they had been held to about 160, U.S. bats are coming in and they're playing very different. They can be a little bit more conservative. They can pick and choose their balls a lot better, and they're not trying to really push that score. So I think that we have to go back, look at it, and really say that I think that the injuries really hurt the U.S. in this tournament. I mean, yes, we're still alive. With a little luck, maybe they squeeze through. I think Pakistan should be able to beat Namibia, but hey, Zimbabwe beat Australia. Sometimes upsets happen. We beat Pakistan a few years ago. So we're going to have to see what happens there. And maybe the U.S. gets a bit of a lifeline. But certainly those injuries in that one key game have really played into this tournament very heavily for the United States.
So Ed, I have to. We can break down and talk about what we really liked from the Netherlands and the Namibia performances in a few minutes. But I've got to ask you, because I do have some empathy for the associate nations that have been trying to do this longer than we have, and haven't quite broken through. Not that we've broken through.
Yeah,
we're not playing at the level of a test nation, but we are playing kind of at the top level that an associate nation can play at, and it's happened rather quickly. It's happened after years of frustration. You've been involved with the game longer than I have in this country. The U.S. Couldn't even field an international side that could attempt to qualify for tournaments. They would go into qualifying and get smoked. Suddenly, in the last 5 years, things have converged where the U.S. not only are we saying this, people around who were interested in cricket around the globe are saying this. Well, boy, the U.S. has really broken through. The U.S. seems to be at the top of the heap among associate nations, up there with the likes of Afghanistan, right, and Bangladesh, who maybe even above those countries at this point, which is just crazy to think of, because it's happened so quickly after so many years of trying and failing and having trouble beating Bermuda, having trouble beating Canada, for having trouble beating Papua New Guinea for years. Now suddenly it's all come together.
I think part of it, and I'll say this about any sport, is front office. When the front office gets their act more together, it trickles down onto the field. When your head office is in disarray, it causes some problems. Not necessarily the only problem the USA faces. One of the big problems from the USA, even though we're a country of 330 million people, there's only so many that play cricket. And so even though we're a large country, we're a small pool of cricket players to choose from. And a lot of cricket players that we have actually come here from other countries. They're not born here. So that becomes part of the issue. I really wish that we had our full strength team playing Pakistan, because if we had beat them, I think not only would we be going through, but we'd also see a bit of a difference and emergence in the U.S. team. I think with that loss, we still have a little bit of a question of where do we really stand. Certainly one of the top associate teams, and I think that's really where the U.S. should be at this point. So they're on a trajectory upward, which is great. We're starting to see a bit of a rise of cricket here in the United States. Group Major League Cricket trying to bring more cricket to the United States, putting it onto more of a stage here in the United States instead of just some international matches that we have here and there periodically, or local cricket, which we actually have a lot of local cricket. If people out there aren't aware, go take a look. There's actually a lot of local cricket that happens. Go find your local park where they play on a Saturday, Sunday, a lot of 30, 40 over tournaments. But I'm starting to see USA cricket on an uprise. And one of the big things about that is ICC supporting it. The ICC wants to see cricket in America. They want to see it be successful here. Obviously, we're a wealthy nation that could support it. But I think that they're also interested in growing the sport, because if you could get even some of the 330 million people that live in the United States to be cricket fans, not only is it a great fan base, but you're also going to find a lot of players that are coming up. So it's that support that they're getting from ICC that's really helping to grow the sport here in the U.S.
Yeah, no question about that. And I think the ICC, unlike FIFA also has been pushing the American market and understanding how the American market could really help them. But I think that the difference here is that the ICC realized governance problems in the U.S. needed to be handled, whereas FIFA felt like governance problems in the U.S. and the violation of rules by the U.S. in that sport were to be indulged. So let's talk about these two matches a bit, because the thing that to me really stands out from the U.S. innings in both matches, Ed, is that you saw, and we're talking about the U.S. innings first. We'll talk about the bowling, get back to the bowling in a minute. So the thing that stands out to me is that we were seeing U.S. batters very kind of intelligently not chase balls the way they did perhaps in the first two matches against, albeit significantly better opposition, especially India. And the other thing that to me was pretty crazy to see were these two young American-born cricketers, born and raised cricketers, Mukamala and Krishnamurthy, anchor the Indians, anchor the innings in the respective. Anchor the Indians is not correct, right? They're not playing for India. Anchor the innings for the United States. In the respective matches, Mukamala against the Netherlands goes for 79 off of 51. Ends up chasing some balls on the offside that I thought were unwise, but it's fine, right? So he goes for 79. He's a 21-year-old. Krishnamurthy, who you and I have tracked since seeing him in Major League Cricket last year, seeing him in person at MLC, today has a fantastic match against Namibia, going for 68 off of 33. He's a 22-year-old American-born and raised player. He's from New Jersey. Mukamala is from he's from Oregon. Mukamala is from New Jersey. But there is something happening with development in, and this is not the case in every sport. I don't want to get into waste too much more of our listeners' time with direct comparisons to soccer, the sport I know best, or hockey, or whatever else. But the U.S. isn't necessarily in other sports where they're competing internationally developing 21 and 22-year-olds of this level. Okay, maybe they'll eventually develop when they're 25 or 26. There's something happening in cricket development that seems to be working. And I was very dubious about it. I've been hearing this for a few years from people. Oh, it'll pay off in the future. You even have to see what's happening at the minor league cricket level, blah, blah, blah. And all these academies that have propped up. But you produce two guys that in a World Cup are extremely comfortable and playing well, and they're in their early 20s.
I think one of the big things that comes into play when we're looking at player development is that there's not a lot of player development in cricket, so it's very focused. Whereas if you take a look at soccer in the United States, a lot of academies, a lot of different places, a lot of different clubs, schools, a lot of different ways to get to professional soccer. And what happens is when you have a lot of different ways to get somewhere, it kind of spreads it a little thin and people have different choices. With cricket, there's only so much cricket in the United States, and so it becomes very focused. And where you have a small group of players that aren't necessarily in competition with each other, but are coming up together, you can focus more on that small group and their training to bring them along as opposed to having a really wide, shallow pool. You have a very narrow but deep pool because they become very focused on cricket if that's their sport. A lot of people, and you know this, or just briefly, when we talk about soccer, really wide pool, how many of those people are also maybe playing football, basketball, other sports? If you're playing cricket, not to say you can't play other sports, but you're probably just focused on cricket. And there's only really one option to come up in cricket in the United States. So because it's a narrow path and there's one way, it's very focused, and that's helping to bring up these young players.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk about the U.S. bowling. We've talked about Ali Khan and Shubham and their significance. Van Schalwick leads this World Cup in wickets taken with 13. The record for an entire tournament, T20 tournament, is 17. So if the U.S. somehow gets into the Super 8, I think he's probably going to break that record, which is crazy to think of. 37-year-old Skadley Van Schalwick, a player that had been ignored by South Africa, moved to the United States to keep his cricket career going. So he's been phenomenal. Harmeet, I noticed, was on that list. Has taken 7 wickets in this tournament. Harmeet, a player that I knew about when he was in India, and he was a U19 player for India, a player that was highly rated by India, kind of fell through the cracks after he had been a standout at the youth level, moves to the U.S., revives his career. And then we mentioned Ali Khan, we mentioned Shubham, also some really good bowling, not so much today, but in the previous 3 matches, arguably our most consistent bowler besides Van Schalwick was Mohammad Mohsin, another guy, Pakistani born, moved to the U.S. To pursue a career. And then Netravalkar was better today. He was back. That was good to see just from an emotional standpoint because he had been rocked in those first 2 matches and dropped. And then Kangeji, who is, I think, the only cricketer over the age of 30 on this team that was actually born in the United States, born in Auburn, Alabama. We won't hold that against him if he has some loyalty to Auburn University. But Kangeji bowls in 1 match, but he bowls the batter, the Dutch batter on the hits the wickets on his very first delivery of the tournament. So, Ed, the U.S. bowling has been one of the stories of this tournament, not specifically for the U.S., but in the entire tournament. Every single match, they're showing a graphic about the top bowlers in this tournament, and there's always more than one U.S. bowler on there, which is remarkable.
Yeah, the U.S. is bowling really well. Certainly it came out in the first game against India, and we saw, and we've discussed earlier today, how those injuries completely changed the game against India, but also against Pakistan. The other issue that comes up, and this also goes into the batting, is that both against India and Pakistan batted first against the United States. The United States was bowling first. Meanwhile, against the Netherlands and Namibia, the United States was batting first. So they were able to put up a score to defend, which is going to affect how you're bowling. You know, initially you want to try to keep the runs low, and of course you always want to keep them low. But when you have a score to defend, especially a big score, you know, like 190 that they had against Netherlands, you're bowling becomes a little bit different because you're just trying to contain it at first. And certainly against the Netherlands, they were really able to advance and take the wickets to really, I'll just say, destroy the Netherlands in that game. Not a good showing by the Netherlands there, but certainly by the U.S. bowlers. U.S. bowling's been great. So once again, we have to go back to that Pakistan game. You take out two of the top bowlers, and it completely changes. You have to wonder what the runs would have been from Pakistan. Could the U.S. have held them? And then if they hold them to a lower score, when the U.S. bats come in, how are they batting? Because they're not going to need to bat as aggressively. So, yeah, U.S. bowling really holding the team together.
So let's shift real briefly to the Windies, and this will be kind of where we end the discussion for today. But the West Indies, I'm being told, benefiting directly from the T20 format, benefiting from the Caribbean Premier League that's been formed, and the fact that their players are able to play there for 60 days. Sometimes come to MLC for 60 days. They don't have many players in the IPL, but maybe coming off this tournament. So what's happening in franchise cricket is, unless you're a Pakistani, because there is a restriction there, the best players coming out of tournaments are consistently being signed by the IPL. This might be, well, actually, maybe we should talk about this first in terms of the U.S. The U.S. potentially could have a few of its players signed in the IPL. I think Van Scalwick is a guy that's gotten some attention this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Harmeet Singh is a guy that's played in the IPL previously, shifted to playing his cricket in this part of the world. Maybe he gets to play in the IPL as well. MLC, to their credit, has decided they want to keep their window separate from the IPL, so guys can play in both competitions. Do you foresee? We'll get to the Windies in a minute, but do you foresee some of these American players potentially getting IPL contracts?
It's possible. Yeah, in the same way, one of the great things about T20 World Cup is that at the end of the day, it's great for nations, but it's really a showcase for the players to allow them to showcase their talent. So a lot of players who do well here.
I'm told cricket was dying as a sport in the West Indies. Young people weren't interested in it. It had been overtaken by American sports and by world football, or soccer, as we call it in the States. Now, cricket is having a bit of a revival in this format specifically, not in the longer formats where the West Indies had excelled, not in the test game where the West Indies at one time dominated the international scene, but in the T20 scene where they have been able to form a successful professional league in the Caribbean Premier League, and their players have access to playing in Major League Cricket, which has attracted some of the top players from Australia, New Zealand, not really some from India, but not really from India, but from England as well.
Yeah, I think Windies cricket's kind of very interesting, and I think that there's a bit of historical perspective we need to look at, particularly back in the 70s. Windies really strong, even from them, great players. Brian Lara's 400 not out, still for anyone in cricket, one of the amazing stands. But then it sort of fell off. American sports have become a lot bigger in a lot of places. American sports, NFL, NBA, everyone's trying to spread out and find some new audiences throughout the world. And with the Caribbean being so close, there is a lot of American sports that are becoming bigger down in the Caribbean. So that seemed to have a bit of a fall off. I think countries like Trinidad and Guyana kept playing cricket very strongly, but some other countries like Jamaica, Antigua, Barbuda really kind of fell off. Barbados kind of fell off from cricket for a bit. Now they're starting to come back. I think part of it is a push to bring back Windies cricket and to really push it. I think one of the other issues that's going to come up, though, is also a bit of a cycle. If we look back, it's kind of people who are now grandparents that were around for the real heyday of the Windies. Then you see like their children, I think there's a bit of a rebellion, like, hey, this sport's too slow for us. And now that you're a generation beyond that, I think that there's an interest that comes back as they sort of rebel against their parents liking American sports. Not that they don't like American sports, but I think that there's an understanding and a certain getting back to roots and a real push by the West Indies to bring back cricket because they were dominant and it was something very special about the West Indies. And not only that they play cricket, but how all these different island nations come together. It's not like Australia, which is one country, or India or Pakistan. It's a bunch of different countries that all need to come together. And while initially they might have all come together to fight against the British Empire after they gained independence in the early 70s, most of the nations, they kind of fell off after they had that victory against them. But it seems like that pride is coming back. But not only pride, it's a question of different countries coming together. So it's really great to see the West Indies and West Indian cricket on the upswing again. And judging by the way they played in the tournament, very tempted to say they're back because they've been playing some great cricket.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I do think there's also a feeling among West Indians that I know that they could potentially compete in cricket. They've tried competing in these other sports as individual nations. That's maybe part of the problem, and they're not able to. And this was an opportunity. It was felt with this 48 team football World Cup format, and with the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, actually all three of them automatically qualifying. The road for qualification was wide open for the English-speaking West Indian countries, and both Jamaica and Trinidad finished in the group behind Curacao, small Dutch-speaking island in the extreme southern part of the Caribbean. Curacao qualifies for the World Cup over the two of them. And I heard immediately afterward from a Trini I know that, hey, maybe we just need to get back to cricket.
That's exactly the point.
Hyping them to the World Cup, but it helps. It helps.
Yeah, I think that's very valid point, and I think it's true because when they do well in cricket, they're still the top of a sport. If you're not doing well, or maybe you're on the bubble of making that World Cup, and certainly we know soccer World Cup is kind of like a fun thing. We know that's what everyone gets into. But how many players from there are you seeing getting big contracts in Germany or England, even if they do make the World Cup? There's not a lot. So
very few.
There's not really right. So it's not really a
Beyond
path
Bailey,
for
that's
advancement.
That's it. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
So there's not really a path for advancement. In cricket, though, there is some ways to advance. Now with the IPL, with Major League Cricket coming about, there's going to be some new ways to advance. But I think it's also going back to the roots and going, let's do what we do well. We're going to get some people into some other sports, but really, we were very strong in this. We have a very strong background. Let's get back to doing what we do well. A bit of staying in our lane. And I think one of the other things that comes up is that they can really come together on cricket as a sport because they have the Windies. They don't have that for soccer. If it was the Windies playing soccer, you might have a whole different ball game, but you don't. There you have Jamaica, you have Curacao, you have Trinidad. They're all separate teams. As the Windies, it gives them that larger pool to pull from. And you have a lot of variety to pull from as well because the styles there are different, that I think it makes the West Indies a very unique cricket team.
Yeah, agreed. And so let's finish on India, who crushed Pakistan in a match that we thought would be competitive. Maybe the U.S. woke India up, woke the sleeping giant. Although they weren't really sleeping, they were just sleeping in one match. India now has won 26 of their last 27 matches in ICC events, which is just a ridiculous number in any historical era. And I made the comparison earlier. I can't remember if we did it on air or off air with what I used to see from Italy and Germany in football back in the day, and maybe that period when Spain was dominating. Just a total belief, even if things aren't going right. Just a total kind of unit over the individuals. And this goes back, I think, to not many people in the States know about this, but there was a tour of Australia that India did in early 2021, which was during the heart of COVID. And they lost some guys because of COVID, and they had a lot of replacements, and they were able to kind of pull off maybe one of the greatest coups in the history of Indian cricket, or cricket history of cricket in general, beating Australia in Australia, and able to kind of create this camaraderie, this depth of player, where you even see in this tournament a few guys who weren't who were called in at the last minute just be part of the unit. You lose two of your greatest players in Kohli and Rohit Sharma, two of the greatest players in Indian cricket history. You know, guys we talk about in the same breath as Gavaskar and Tendulkar, and they haven't missed a beat. Right, these two guys are gone, and I haven't noticed. So there is something about India now in this sport, a nation that I would have to say, Ed, I think historically had underachieved. A nation that maybe mockingly, from my perspective, I would compare with England in football. Right? Okay, well, India can talk about 1983 the way England talks about 66, but you know, you guys are chasing something that you're never going to get. And now suddenly that's changed completely. And I do think part of it is this format and franchise cricket, right? The franchise cricket league that took off happened to be in India. It could have been somewhere else, but it happened to be in India, which is the same reason why my historical analysis of England in football is about to be blown out of the water, because of the Premier League in football, England is eventually going to win something in the international game. So it's kind of a similar trajectory, but do you put it all on the IPL, or do you think that there's other factors here?
I think there's a lot of factors. Indian cricket, pretty strong going 80s, 90s. Started to run into some issues in I would say maybe even the late 90s, but early 2000s. I think they managed to straighten out a lot of the issues and emerge a lot stronger from it. The other thing that's happened, though, that's really helped them is cricket's kind of fallen off in some of the other countries where it was big. It's not as big in Australia anymore. It's not as big in England anymore. And so that also gave India the impetus to do better, to solidify as a country. Cricket's huge in India, as you know. It's not the national sport, but it might as well be. And yeah, so many people there play. It gives them a really wide pool to bring in people from. So they've been able to focus a lot. But at the same time, you know, you talk about how strong India has been. I'm just going to go back to the U.S. briefly. The U.S. gave them a bit of a run for their money. And we have to wonder now, if our bowlers hadn't gotten injured, what would have happened. Maybe the U.S., I don't know if they would have squeaked it out. Maybe it would have been a little bit closer. But you certainly have to go back to the Pakistan game. So after watching U.S.-Pakistan, and I'm thinking, hey, after Pakistan hasn't been that strong, maybe they finally got their act together and they're back. But then you see them go on their loss to India, and you start to question that. And then we look at how the U.S. plays, albeit against non-test teams, about associate members in Netherlands and Namibia.
In fairness, Pakistan performed very poorly against the Netherlands also, and the U.S. crushed them. I mean, it was never in doubt from the first ball. So yeah, continue.
No, so now we have to wonder, was it because of those injuries to the U.S. and us not just having the depth to be able to stay in there and play a good game against Pakistan, because we've played well against everybody else in the group, that you really have to kind of wonder where Pakistan is at this point. The only good game they've had against was against an injured U.S. team. So part of it is not just how good India is, and certainly they're the strongest team in this tournament, but when you compare them to Pakistan, which has historically been a very big clash, both countries really up for it, a lot of political ramifications as well. We like to keep politics out of sports, but certainly, as we've learned not only from the Olympics, but certainly most recently in this T20 tournament with teams that didn't want to actually go into India to play, and they're playing in Colombo. You knew that this was a big game, and Pakistan just doesn't really show up for it at all. And so we have to kind of wonder. But India, certainly the favorite in this T20. I think that India is going to be very strong. West Indies very strong. And Australia, who were looking very good, particularly after beating England the way they did recently in the Ashes, takes a loss to to Zimbabwe. Is that a one-off kind of thing where maybe they just have a bad day? Maybe they have some sick players. We don't know what's going on. Or,
yeah, and we know
maybe
Hazelwood
they're
and
just not
Cummings.
as strong. Who
Yeah,
knows?
and we know Hazelwood and Cummings both withdrew from the squad pretty late for Australia. So that's I mean, right now I think South Africa. I was impressed by New Zealand in their first two matches, and then they played South Africa. Right, they played someone, and no, they're not there. So South Africa, India, West Indies. Those are the three nations for me. I'm watching closely in terms of potential to win this tournament. England have been very, very poor, have been very disappointing. Now, there is a bit of a feeding frenzy once again in the English press. We see this in every sport where England goes to it. Well, there are three sports England cares about, right? Football / soccer over everything, but then rugby and cricket. And we see it in rugby and cricket if things don't go well. So there's a bit of a feeding frenzy about the struggles of the England team right now in the in the English press. They get killed by the Windies. They barely beat a Nepal team that has not been competitive in their fixtures since. But England has still got a core of players. They are the other nation besides India and Australia. And in Australia, a lot of those players have cycled out. So they're really the other nation outside of India that have a lot of players in their squad that have won ICC events. So that's
right.
I still keep an eye on them because of that, but certainly based on the performances we've seen in this tournament, that the U.S. has performed better than England. We'll just put it that way, as have probably some other associate nations. So let's also close on this, Ed, in terms of this tournament. I'm always struck by cricket fans and the culture of cricket fans. What we see when you have major tournaments hosted in other nations is that you have a lot of games with a lot of empty seats and a lot of no interest. And I went through this working the Copa America in 2016 here in the United States. Games where we had 8,000 or 9,000 people at a football match. It was embarrassing. International football match. I am struck. There have been some exceptions. There have been some matches where the crowds haven't been there, but I am struck by how big the crowds are in India, in particular. In Sri Lanka, we could talk about another time, but in India, for matches that don't involve India, Eden Gardens gets 40,000 plus for a match involving Scotland. We see basically a full house for New Zealand and South Africa. Granted, those are two big nations, but it's a lot of locals turning up. I'm hearing from a contact of mine that he was struck by the amount of support the U.S. was getting in Chennai, which is my family's hometown. So I kind of know there are connections to the U.S. from there, and a lot of probably a lot of people who have family in the U.S. there. But the amount of interest Indian cricket fans have in just watching cricket is something that always strikes me, and that's something that this sport, and actually, quite frankly, most sports suffer from around the world. If you don't have a rooting interest, people don't show up.
Yeah, I think India is probably one of the few countries where people watch cricket just to watch cricket. If you're in England, might watch England. If you're playing the World Cup there, if you're playing the World Cup anywhere, of course, people are going to be a little bit more excited. But I think that India is the cricket country right now, so it makes a lot of sense having the tournament there. Not a lot of empty seats. And one of the other issues that comes up, and this is my understanding, it has to do with ticket prices, which at least for the Indian audience seems to be a lot more reasonable than it's been at some other venues that they've had. And part of that just has to do with different countries' economics. So they've been able to get more people in. And I think that's been very telling. I will say this, just as far as fans, though, India, great cricket fans who love cricket. The fans that impress me most, and from what I've seen in this tournament, certainly from a couple years ago, are the Nepalese people. They're showing up in great numbers to support their team.
Oh, my goodness. I mean,
Nepal
they
didn't
just
do that great this year, but I got to say.
They've taken over ground again in this tournament.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yep. They're traveling, they're taking over, they're making themselves known. And I'm really excited for cricket. I hope it grows in Nepal because their fans are amazing. Having spoken to a number of them, really nice people. And I think that they're really excited by cricket. So I'm hoping that cricket takes off in Nepal for them.
Yeah, and obviously a country that maybe they have some winter sports that they're involved with, but otherwise, a country that has not traditionally been interested in any team sports. To see cricket grow there, maybe a last word here, Ed. Italy gets their first win in the in World Cup history. The bizarreness right now, I was told by an Italian American friend who is kind of focused on the Olympics, which are happening in Italy, in the Milano area. But the bizarreness, as he put it, of Italy being more competitive in cricket and rugby than they are in football, which is the national sport. The Azzurri is the obsession of so many Italians. Is just this paradox that he's trying to wrap his head around. How did this happen? I don't know how it happened, but I do know there is now a pattern. If you have a lot of Indians move to a place, or a lot of Afrikaners specifically, cricket grows in those places. And I think in northern Italy, they've had an influx of both sets. People from India and people from white South Africans. If that's politically incorrect, I'm sorry, but white South Africans. So that apparently has stimulated some interest in the sport in Italy.
Well, initially AC Milan was not just a football club, but also a cricket club. So cricket's actually been around in Italy for quite a long time. But once again, kind of like the United States, it's a question of narrow paths because only so many people are playing and you only have so many people there. It's a bit easier to put focused resources behind the team to spur the sport on. If you look at Italian soccer, and we could do a whole series on that.
Oh,
But just to go into it briefly, it's really spread out, really wide. Everyone has their own opinion, a lot of competing interests. And so you have a lot of conflict between the different teams, different entities. Cricket, though, if you're going to get behind it, kind of like cricket in the U.S., you need to put your energy behind it and have it really focused because you're dealing with such a small set of people that are playing. And I think that's what allows cricket to come through. And even rugby, very similar in Italy, as opposed to soccer.
Yeah, we could do a whole a series of 20 podcasts, a 20 podcast series on the corruption, the nativism, the tribalism, and the just megalomania that has led to the complete collapse of Italian football, both Italy as an international competing nation in football, as well as Serie A falling from the best league in the world to really kind of a mid-level, highly unwatchable product, for lack of a better term. But that's for another time. Maybe there's a comparison with Pakistani cricket or West Indian cricket, although Windies we're talking about pulling out. So Ed, we'll do this again next week. Thank you for your time, and check out From the Pavilion's YouTube page where we're doing our daily recaps of the T20 cricket. And then after the tournament, Ed and I are going to get into some deep cultural issues that I think y'all are going to enjoy. Maybe you guys are going to hate us for it, but you're going to enjoy the thought-provoking type of conversations we have. We'll talk to you real soon.